Most people think that once you plant a food forest, the work is done. But in reality, the first few years is when the real management starts. Without a little bit of guidance, plants compete too much, vigorous species take over, and the system becomes chaotic. And so in this video, I'm going to show you how to manage competition, how to stop certain plants from taking over, and how to guide your food forest as it matures. The biggest myth about food forests is that people imagine that they are completely maintenance free, but in reality they are low maintenance, not no maintenance. If we look at what happens in a mature forest, then what we end up with is lots of trees, canopies closing and no light getting to the understory, and that's not what we want, because we want our food forest to be really productive and to have a great diversity of plants that are really useful for us. So think of it more as gardening with a lighter touch. So we're guiding the forest garden. Especially in the early years, we're looking to help things to gain balance. We're helping to develop a structure, and we're helping to guide things in the direction that we want them to go. And the main thing to tackle here is to stop certain plants from just overtaking the system. But once your ecosystem matures, after say maybe 4 or 5 years, then the workload reduces significantly, and so at this point you really are becoming more of a curator of the space rather than gardening it very intensively. If you'd like to be part of a conversation about designing, building and managing food forests, then you could join the Food Forest Circle, which is an online community that I've just started on Patreon. I'll leave details in the comments. The idea of this space is that we can learn, share ideas and ask questions and all help each other out as we go along. So you might be wondering what I mean by competition in regards to plants and managing a forest garden. And really what each plant wants is plenty of light and plenty of water, and space so that it can, spread as far as it can. But in a garden, in any garden, and in nature as well, these resources are limited, and therefore if we put plants too close together, they're competing so much for those resources that neither of them will grow well together. So what we're trying to do really is to balance that competition between each plant having all of its needs met as much as possible, but at the same time making the most of the space that we have available. So we don't want to put things too far apart because we're not sort of maximising the amount of crops that we can grow in that space. And that's partly why forest gardening is such a great idea, because then we're maximising the vertical space rather than trying to cram everything into the same horizontal layer. We're stacking plants, and so we're filling the space that way. But equally, if we give things too much space apart, then there's just bare soil everywhere, which is not ideal either. So in terms of managing competition, we're trying to fill our garden with as much a diversity of plants as possible and as many cropping plants as possible, but without putting them so close together that they're struggling and they're competing with each other. In a natural ecosystem, out in nature, in a woodland somewhere, really ends up being survival of the fittest. So climbers might do well in an overcrowded understory because they can get up and out of the light. It might be like in some woodlands, ground cover plants have almost disappeared because there's just not enough light getting right down to the ground level for them to grow. And so whilst we're taking inspiration from these natural systems, what we want to do is make sure that the plants that are growing well in the garden are the ones that we want to use, are the ones that are productive for us. And so we don't really want to have a survival of the fittest scenario in many respects, because then it massively reduces the diversity of the plants that we can harvest from. And I think it's this competition aspect of forest gardening that puts so many people off when you're sat designing inside with your cup of tea and your notebook, and you're just thinking, how will I know what plants are going to grow well together? And a lot of the time you don't really know until you put them out in the garden. And that is why actually a really important part of forest garden management is actually observation. So it's actually going out, looking around your food forest, seeing what's growing well together. Is one plant being crowded out by another? And then wondering about how to manage that. Do we move plants further apart? Sometimes there can be things like someone in the food forest circle the other day was asking about lemon balm. They had lemon balm so much they didn't know what to do with it and it was going a bit mad. So one of the ways that we can manage that is either we manage it through harvesting it. So we actually cut the lemon balm and either take that as a harvest that we can use to dry and use for herbal tea or tinctures or something. Or you can even just do chop and drop. So you can cut the whole plant right back to the ground, chop up all the leaves and just spread them as a mulch around the other plants that were being swamped out by it a bit. So they all get a bit of room to breathe, they get a bit more light and space, and the lemon balm is so robust and so tough that it will just come back again anyway. Another option is that you either move the lemon balm or you move some of the other plants around it to move them away from, give each other a bit more space. So there are two ways to sort of tackle the same problem. So a few strategic ways that we might want to manage our plants is one, that we can prune them back. So say a shrub has got really bigger than you wanted it to be, is you can prune that back. So you can do that either from taking some bits off the ends of the branches to reduce the size that way, or my preferred method is to take out 1/3 of the branches each year. So the most mature branches I'll take out 1/3 each year, and some of these pruning techniques are really specific to individual plants. So the best plan is to look at the individual trees and shrubs that you have in your food forest and actually look at the best way to prune those individually, so that when you come to manage your food forest, you know what the best way is to manage those different plants, rather than trying to do a one size fits all. And the absolutely worst thing that I see people do is just prune everything into a blob, everything into a circle, because quite often you're chopping off the parts of the plants that are going to be producing the flowers and the fruits that you're actually wanting to harvest. So try and do a bit of research about the individual plants within your food forest and how best to prune those. There are some plum trees and a Szechuan pepper just behind me here. So whereas if I had a larger food forest, I would just let those grow and I probably wouldn't really prune them at all. In this space, I'm wanting everything to stay much smaller, so I'm going to be pruning those quite a bit heavier than I would be doing if they were in a larger garden. So there's different, depending on the size of your garden, you may decide to have a different pruning regime. So as I mentioned before with the lemon balm, if something's really sort of being very vigorous, then actually chop and drop is a really great way to manage it. I do this with things like catmint or even mint or things like that, where if something's becoming too big and it's just taking over, I just chop it up, and that sort of reduces the vigour a little bit, gives it a bit of a shock. And if that's a really, really vigorous plant, then it can just give everything else around it a bit more space to breathe. And throughout the growing season, I have certain plants that I mentioned in the video about guilds, where they're actually classed as mulches. So these are things like maybe comfrey or borage, plants that I actually purposefully grow just in order to chop them up and use them as a mulch around the garden. And a really simple one of these is just your lawn. So when you keep cutting your lawn, you can take those lawn clippings and you can lay them as mulch in your garden, and that's a really good way of keeping weeds down, keeping moisture in, and adding organic matter to the soil all the time. And you're going to want to be thinking about editing your design. So I try and come out once a month and make some really detailed notes of what's growing well in the garden, how it's growing with all the other plants around it, and any changes that I might want to make. So I've got this Japanese wineberry, which really doesn't want to be right in the middle of this border, it wants to be at the back. So I make a note to myself to move that later on in the year when it's finished growing and it's gone back into being dormant. I can move that back. So I noted last year that the Taunton at the back, Taunton kale had got a bit too big. It was starting to swamp out everything around it. So this spring I've been pruning it, and then a big storm just the other night did a bit of pruning for me because loads of branches snapped off. But really it's this observation stage that's really key to managing your food forest, because it's very easy to just think, oh well, the idea is that nature does the gardening and I don't do anything, but that's not really how we have the most successful and most productive food forest. It's by actually making careful observations about how plants are interacting. My Chinese artichokes had just gone completely crazy and were swamping everything else out, so I dug out probably 5/6 of the amount of Chinese artichokes that I had in this bed, and I've just left one small patch. It's not something I use hugely in the garden anyway, and so there's no need to have loads of that. Whereas actually the Jerusalem artichokes, and somebody in the food forest circle had mentioned about how they find them very invasive in their garden, but actually I think because I like to eat them so much that I harvest a lot of them, therefore they don't have a chance to spread too far. I actually decided I wanted some more Jerusalem artichokes in this border, so I've planted another couple of patches of them. So you can see how actually the fact that I'm maintaining it by harvesting my Jerusalem artichokes a lot means that they act very differently in this food forest border to somebody else who maybe grows them but doesn't eat them very often, and therefore they can get a bit rampant and start to spread out. So it's how we actually manage our food forest going forward that means whether it's a success or not. And the management might be as simple as making some notes saying, oh, well, actually I don't like this plant very much, so maybe I'll take that out and put something else more productive in its space. At the moment there's not really anything in this bed now that I don't like, so I've kept everything in here other than reducing the Chinese artichokes quite a bit. But this seasonal observation is a really important part of any maintenance. And then you can make a plan, which means you can come and refer to that every year. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, if you have some plants that are really struggling, that are just not doing well, always look a bit weak, and are never really sort of vigorous enough for you to actually take a harvest from, then maybe you need to either move them to another part of your garden, or you need to just get rid of them altogether. So it's really just about trying to get that balance right. Nothing's being too successful or struggling too much. You don't want a garden full of struggling plants. And there's also managing self-seeding plants, because self-seeding plants are some of the most useful plants in a food forest, but they can be some of the hardest to manage. It's fantastic that they will just drop their seeds and then you don't have to do anything and the plants will come back up again in the spring. I have the mountain spinach, some people call it tree spinach. That was absolutely fantastic last year in certain areas of the garden, but actually it came up all in the onion beds, all in amongst the annual vegetables. So I did actually have to go and lift quite a few seedlings from there and take them and plant them in other areas. So if you have something that's being really too successful in self-seeding in one area, but actually you have some gaps in other parts of your garden, you can lift those seedlings and go and transplant them around. I've got some plantain, which has almost made its own little carpet of seedlings, which is great, but I don't actually need that much plantain all in that one area. So I'm going to be transplanting it to other areas, including the fire pit area behind me, which has been wood chip bark, but actually going forwards we're transforming it into a lawn of self-heal, some clover and some plantains. So as those seedlings get a little bit bigger, I'll be transplanting them out and dotting them all around that fire pit area to become part of the lawn, because plantains are really great at growing in compacted soil and they don't mind being trampled. But are also one of the plants that I use the most for things like if you get stings or rashes or anything like that, or burns, it's really great to put in a balm and to use medicinally. So I want to keep some in the garden. So plants are the most likely to take over. Some plants are naturally just really vigorous, and I'd be really interested to hear in your food forest what are the plants that have been the most vigorous for you, the most likely to take over. I find this really interesting because in my garden I use a Juga reptans bugle as a really successful ground cover, fantastic for pollinators. But I know that in some countries, some parts of the US, people have said, oh, there's no way I'd ever plant that in my garden. It's a really invasive plant. You know, in different settings, different plants are going to act differently. So I'd be really interested to hear what are your most problem plants. Some examples are things like mint. I had Nepalese raspberry that completely ruined a border at a garden when I took over, and I had to spend nearly 2 years trying to get rid of it through mulching and digging. There's some self-seeding annuals. Brambles are one of the biggest problems in food forests in the UK, I would say, particularly some of the larger ones. They just take over. And with some of these plants, it's not always about taking them out entirely. Sometimes it can be just about keeping them in balance. So I've also planted some mint inside an old tin bath with the bottom knocked out, so that it's got a barrier around it, and you can make a barrier out of timber, or you can chop the bottom off a plastic pot, just something that stops the plants spreading along the surface. So I know I might have made some of you disappointed that food forests are not zero maintenance ways of growing food, but the really good news is that over time, as your ecosystem stabilises, the workload decreases until really you have very little to do at all other than come and harvest and maybe do a bit of chop and drop throughout the year. As you grow in this perennial way, in this perennial system, your soil improves, and therefore the plant health improves. By adding in the plants to help with natural pest management, you will find that pest problems almost become a thing of the past. And plants will eventually find their niche, so you're not having to do that task of checking on them and moving them around. That's sort of really something that happens in the earlier stages of a food forest. And as plants find their happy place, as self-seeders find the place that they're going to grow well, it becomes much less work, and it's much more about just enjoying watching the ecosystem flourish. And then you can spend your time encouraging friends and neighbours and family to set up their own food forest. In the Food Forest Circle community, I'm creating a zine every month with maintenance tasks to do in a small scale food forest, including some other tips on things like plants for pollinators that month. So if you want to have a look at that and to help you with creating a maintenance plan for your food forest, then take a look on Patreon. It's completely free to join. I do have some paid tiers if you want to support my work, but it's completely free to join, so it's accessible to everybody. The next live Zoom chat will be the last Tuesday in April at 7 o'clock UK time, so it would be great to have you come along, ask some questions and join the conversation. So the take home really is that the work in a food forest decreases over time, and if you're looking to design your own food forest, if it's something that you're still just thinking about, then take a look at this video.